Welcome to our 5th night of Week of Prayer. During this week, we've gone through the acronym of prayer. Today, we're going over EQUIP for E. I pray that today's testimonies and today's thoughts will bring inspiration and motivation and empowerment to your life.
Come live in me all my life. Take over. Come breathe in me. And I will rise on eagle's wings. Here I am waiting, abide in me, I pray. Here I am longing for you. Hide me in your love. Bring me to my knees. May I know Jesus more and more. Come live in me all my life. Take over. Come breathe in me, and I will rise on eagle's wings. Come live in me all my life. Take over. Come breathe in me. I will rise on eagle's wings.
Hi, my name is Helen. This is my testimony. Today, my testimony is about how prayer has equipped me to pause and listen to God's voice so He can guide me in my life. I remember in my younger years, my dad would wake up 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and he would do his daily prayers and devotionals. One morning, I did follow him downstairs, and I remember catching him in his middle of his prayer. And this scene that I saw, he was just in this dark room with a lamp just shining on him with his Bible open. And I just remember that vision and that moment that he had with God really had a lasting impression on me. To see such a man at such a vulnerable state where he really completely relied on God and just wanted to have this alone time with Him made a real big impression. And I think from that day on, that's when my prayer and my devotional life started. I remember in my younger years, when I used to work as a therapist at a hospital, I was going through some rough patches in my life, and that night before, I earnestly prayed to God that I really wanted to hear him talk to me and to give me some sign. I know, such a cliche, but this is such a funny thing to say, but this is what I earnestly prayed for. And that next day, I had a patient who I had to do an assessment. And in the middle of the assessment, this guy just touches me and he paused and he said, "Are you feeling okay today?" And I thought, oh, am I looking really bad, or am I kind of showing him that I'm kind of sad? And I knew I wasn't. I was very professional at that state. But he asked me if I was okay, and that the funny thing is that morning he had a feeling that he had to bring this book for someone that he was going to meet today, and he didn't know what that person was going to be or where, but he had this book in his hand and he handed it to me, and he said, "I don't know what you're going through, but I know this book has helped me a lot, and I hope it can help you." And at that moment, I just started bawling. I'm a very emotional person, and for a stranger to ask me those questions, it was such an interesting thing. And I just remember I felt at peace at that time too, because I knew then that God was talking to me, and that somehow the angel has given this guy this inkling to bring his book and give it to me. And sure enough, as I read that book, it really helped me. And from that experience, I think that was my very first experience where I really realized God does listen, and that I can trust him, and that he is here to guide me. So I would say with that experience, my prayer life has gotten even stronger and deeper. My deeper relationship with God, with personal information, and just relying on him completely. In my older years, as I was working with Eddie, he opened up his practice 12 years ago. And I really wanted to make sure that this office is not just a practice of, dental care, but I wanted it to be a special environment where we were servicing God. And so my daily prayer is that God would bring the Holy Spirit into his office, and that somehow people will leave our facility with just a little bit of love or a little bit of God in their hearts before they leave. And the funny thing is that not every day, but I would say quite often, people would ask us if we were Christians, and then I would ask them, "Oh, how did you know?" And they would just say, "Oh, I can just feel it in here." And that's when I would just be like, "Oh my gosh, God is really in here. Listen, I lit in here, and he heard my prayers, and people are feeling his presence." And with that small start, people started to open up to me. And I'm just a front office person, but for someone to really open up and start talking to me about their personal lives was something very special. And they would actually ask me to pray for them. And then with time, I'd ask them, or different people, if I could pray for them as well, or if I could share their personal experience with our prayer group, and we would pray for them. And that helps me realize that God does listen, and he really is there when we ask him to answer our prayers. He really does answer our prayers. I would say with my experience in my health, last October I did have a stroke. And having that stroke, it just came out of nowhere for me being very healthy. And for a couple of months, the doctors had no idea why I had that stroke. But this past February, I was with some friends, and a friend suggested that I get a second opinion. And I know I've been praying to God about how is it possible that I had this stroke, and what's the reasoning. I would like to find the answer. And out of just nowhere, my friend just said, I have someone who is a cardiologist, and he can you can maybe get a second opinion from him. And so sure enough, he contacts him, and this guy contacts him back and says, oh, she might be a great candidate for this one test. And so immediately, I would say, gosh, with less than a week, he contacted me. Someone from his office contacted me. And I had this procedure done. And sure enough, they found how the stroke was caused. And so they found out that I have a hole in my heart and that a small blood clot just traveled through and went straight to my brain. And even though for some people it might be sounding very like, oh my goodness, that's terrible, but that was the greatest news I ever heard, because now there's a reason and I can fix it. So the cardiologist told me that there are options that we can help you resolve this issue so we can minimize the cause of stroke again. And so that's another experience that I have that I feel like God really is guiding me in my life. So I know that when I pray, He does listen and He does answer prayers. I think this has equipped me to have this stronger relationship with Him and just rely on Him. And so I'm thankful for my dad, who has given me this example of prayer and this complete reliance on God, and to just pause and listen, because He does listen and will answer.
Something I ask myself a few times a week is, what does it mean for Maria Kim to be a Jesus follower? I'm not asking what it means for Daniel Park to be a follower, or Pastor Jason, or Pastor Isaac, or Coach Jesse, or John, or Linda, or Ruth. What does it mean for me to do the will of God today? What would that look like? What would that feel like? As many of you know, I taught high school biology in South Central LA for 5 years. I guess when every teacher starts out, they want to make big changes and see huge improvements in their students' lives. As the years progressed, I began to realize that I wasn't seeing the big changes I had hoped, but a lot of small changes. And I began to realize that what was more important was that I was doing my best as a teacher, and that I was doing what God wanted me to do and not focus on what my students should do. There was one weekend when my husband and I went to LA for a Hillsong concert. Chris Tomlin was there, and it was just really amazing. And then afterwards we went and had some delicious LA tacos, and then we came home. On Monday, one of my students asked me if I was in LA over the weekends. I was like, yeah, did you see me at a concert, or did you see me on the street? And he's like, yeah, I saw you at a concert. Oh, you should have said hi. He's all, nah, that's okay. So he just kind of laughed. But suddenly I began to notice that this student really started to do his work. And this student was really struggling a lot. He never really did his work. He wasn't motivated. And so I was just excited to feel like, man, I made this connection with him. He saw me in a space outside of school, and now he's doing his work. And so I was just excited to see him turning in assignments. Well, imagine my feelings a few days later when I was talking with his special ed teacher, and she said, you know, he's been trying really hard because he wants to be on the football team. Inside, I just had to laugh. Who do we think I am? I am nobody. And for me to try to take credit for impacting the student, isn't that pretty arrogant? So as I go through each day, I try to be less and less focused on doing something big and impactful. I try to be focused on what God wants for me that day and fulfill that. I try to find the little opportunities that God has given me to fulfill His mission in my life. That could be just encouraging someone at work, telling my kids I'm proud of them, telling my husband that I'm here to support him. It could be talking to my retired neighbors, taking their dog on a walk when they aren't feeling well. It's nothing big, but those opportunities are what God has equipped me for. You and I might think that it takes something really big to do something impactful for God, that you have to be equipped with amazing talents. We might feel, you know what? I can't do it. I don't have that equipment. We might not have the money, the intellect, the personality, the talent to do things that are amazing. But we can all do something small. We are all equipped with something small that we can do for God. It could be a simple text message, a conversation with a friend, sitting with someone new at potluck, reaching out to a lonely neighbor. It doesn't have to be anything grand. When we use the simple tools that we have, we can find that we will be equipped to take part in the bigger picture of what God has planned. It is not our job to downplay God's ability to use the little things that we do for His mission and for His glory. God used the shepherd boy with a stone to bring down a giant. God used the little maid to heal the captain of an army. God used a young teenage girl to raise the Son of God. We don't have to jump out of our box or jump really far out of our comfort zone for God. Sometimes we can just stick our hand out of the box or just push our toes across the line of our comfort zone. Sometimes that's all it takes to use the tools that are in our hand. You may not have felt equipped to do something grand for Him, but as you consistently do the little things that are in your power to do, you will realize the mighty impact of those little things that can do something great for God. In 1831, 4 Native Americans walked into the St. Louis Office of Indian Affairs. Captain William Clark of the famous Lewis and Clark team to the Pacific Northwest recognized them from tribes that were quite far west. When he asked them what brought them so far east, their response was that they were looking for the white man's book of heaven. For 2 years, Clark told them what he could of the Bible. In 1833, a friend of Clark, William Walker, came to visit him and learned of the Native Americans' journey to the east for the Bible. Walker was so amazed by this story that he wrote a letter to his friend, G.P. Tesasway, about their quest for the Bible. Tesasway published that letter in the newspaper called the Christian Advocate and Journal, which sparked such a large interest in reaching the indigenous peoples of the West. Of the 4 Native Americans that came to St. Louis, only 1 made it back home with the knowledge of heaven. The other 3 passed away from sickness. But by the time missionaries who were inspired by the story arrived in the West, they were already greeted by a group of Native American believers, and they were able to spread the light of the gospel together. While I'm saddened to think of the many Christian groups that took advantage of the Native Americans and very much mistreated them, I'm also inspired to think of how the gospel changed the lives of so many of them through this story. William Walker never imagined that his simple letter would spark such a movement to support the gospel being carried to the indigenous people of North America. Is God asking me or you to write a small letter today? What is that small thing that you can do for Him that might lead to great things, and it might not? You may never even know in your own lifetime what God can do with something small. Warren Buffett once said, "Someone's sitting in the shade today because someone planted a tree a long time ago." Of course, he wasn't talking about the Bible. But what seed can you plant today that can become a tree in the future? Never underestimate the power God has to equip you with what you need to work for Him.